Welcome to the Aligned Powerhouse, the podcast for executive women who are done leading from burnout and ready to rise from alignment. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany McGeehan, licensed psychologist, high performance and mindset coach, and guide for high achieving women who are ready to lead, live, and love without abandoning themselves. Here, we unpack the nervous system truths, mindset shifts, and emotional patterns that drive your leadership so you can build power from the inside out. Let's get into it. All right, so recently I was reading an article about Mark Cuban, and he was talking about his number one business hack, or the hack that he has used in building his businesses. Basically, he was telling a story about a powdered milk business that he tried to run back in the day. And what he talked about was that his ability to pivot is the number one thing that has served him in building these monster businesses that he has built his empire on today. So he tells the story of, I only put a limited amount of capital into this business, and then I started selling. And I paid attention to the responses that I was getting as I was going through this process. And essentially, he talks about within 2 weeks, he realized this was not a viable business model. And this is something I'm talking about over and over and over with my clients, is your ability to connect to the data, regulate your nervous system, and pivot is going to be a game changer as you are navigating not only leadership in the C-suite, but also building businesses that are now crossing into that 7-figure mark end, as well as navigating relationships at home, right? All of it is connection to intuition. It is connection to self. And it's knowing that you have the capacity and the ability to pivot when needed. So he has this line in the article, and it really just stood out to me. He said, it doesn't matter how many times you fail. You only have to be right once. Now, I have yet to ever meet a business owner or someone in executive leadership who would not agree with this quote, right? But for some reason, as we move up the ladder, whatever it is that we have deemed to be all of a sudden unattainable, there's something about crossing into this space where then we lose access to the very thing that got us there, right? Connection to self. The fact that we make very great decisions and we know how to move the needle forward based on our instincts. But all of a sudden you're sitting at a different table, and now there's it shuts down, right? And it's because we're getting in our head too much. So what I want you to take away from this episode, and part of the reason I was like, we have to unpack this, is that the power to win, the power to scaffold and truly build something that is sustainable and that is an empire, it wasn't in pushing harder. It wasn't in this idea of power in order to win. It was the ability to pivot and trust yourself. Guys, this is why I'm talking about self-trust over and over and over and over again. The women that I work with know how to read the data. You already know how to make the behavioral changes needed. What's lacking is the ability to trust that that is already there, right? Because in reality, we cannot overfunction continually. You can go into a season. I do believe in seasons of hustle. I think that that is critical depending on the caliber that you want to push on. I also think you don't get out of that just because you decide, okay, I'm not going to climb the corporate ladder. I'm not going to build a business, right? I mean, there are even moments within our days, right? Like micro hours of over functioning and pushing. If you have children or if you're doing a big home project, you cannot escape this. It's simply a fact of life, is that there will be moments of over functioning. But if you rely on that over functioning to build success, it will not be sustainable. It's going to come down into your team morale. And your personal energy, your personal frequency is going to align with that, and you're going to get stuck at that lower end, okay? So I want y'all to pull out your journals. I want you to write this down. I don't care if you're taking notes on your phone, okay? But I want you to write down data over drama. One more time. I want you to take home this concept of looking at the data over drama. Leaders, whether you're functioning at home or at work, you have to have the ability to discern between a temporary challenge versus a structural misalignment. Okay? I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like at home from examples that I've had with my clients. Okay. So I will talk with clients and they spiral because their minds are their greatest assets. Guys, if you can't connect to the body, then you can't release that stress. You will spiral. And my ladies are phenomenal at making sense of their experiences. So here's what happens. All of a sudden it's back to school season, right? I have a client who calls this Mommy New Year. Love that idea. But the time frame that it takes to lead up into moving and getting the kiddos back to school, that 2-week crunch is a crunch. It is a drain. It is so much stress. And so what I will hear is all of a sudden my partner and I are fighting like crazy, and I don't understand. I don't understand why he does this. This has always been an issue. I don't even know if this is the marriage that I'm supposed to be in. I don't even know this person. They have spiraled. They've gone down the emotional regression loop at this point. Okay. What I'm encouraging you to do is to take a step back. We need the data. What context is this happening in? Oh, well, it has to do with conversations about the kids and getting them ready. It also has to do with work. Guys, finances are the number one reason for divorce. That is always going to be a stressful point of contention. Turns out it is about projects that need to get done around the house, right? So what I'm hearing is that this is related to some of the more stressful areas of a relationship anyway. But the way that you're making meaning of it, what you're doing with that information is causing you to question this marriage rather than say, hey, let's look at the data. Like, are these types of arguments also coming up in the middle of summer? Are they also coming up on vacation? Are they also coming up during lulls in business? Chances are they're not. We want to pay attention to the data over the drama because not every feeling is something to be believed. I'm not saying every emotion is not valid. It's absolutely valid. However, if you are having a tremendously huge reaction simply because there's more stress in your tank, that is not cause to all of a sudden go and sign divorce papers. Okay? That's cause to go get a massage, to go and reevaluate. Do we need to pivot, right? That's the difference between a temporary challenge. This is a season of stress versus a structural misalignment. Okay? Is this relationship right for me? Is this marriage right for me? If you can connect to your body, then you can make this decision at light speed because then you're going to know there's so much intensity in my body. I am having an intense fight reaction. I'm in my sympathetic nervous system and it is telling me there's lots of activation, right? I need to go tend to that before I can actually more appropriately make sense of my experience. If you don't have that connection, you're going to jump up into your head and you're going to spiral and you're going to be gone. So data over drama. Okay. Now I want to talk to you a little bit more about the steps that actually go into building not just self-trust, but also the self-trust ability to pivot. Okay. So first of all, data over drama. We are listening to the data, meaning we are paying attention to what are the results that we are getting? What kind of engagement are we receiving? What kind of feedback are we receiving? What does the data actually look like? Okay. Again, I'm going to relate this into a relationship and then we'll look at it a little bit in business because guys, truly when I say the personal is professional and the professional is personal, I'm not playing with you. These skills are copy and paste. It's just that the data points might look a little bit different, right? So results in terms of a marriage is, are we satisfied with our sex life? Are we able to navigate conflict in an effective way? How are our children being raised? Are we pretty good at co-parenting? In general, what does our life satisfaction look like? Am I capable of being in relationship with this person and still tending to the things that I want to be doing? Am I able to go chase my dreams? Am I able to feel supported in the things that I want to do, right? Engagement in this arena is going to look like, is my partner also bringing data and facts and effort to the table? It's going to look different for everyone, but are they engaging with me? And then feedback. What is happening from here? What behavioral changes do you see happening and taking place? And is it moving the needle forward rather than you being the only one who's doing that, right? We want to pay attention to the data. As we do this, it's going to loop around. It's going to tell you that you have the ability to trust yourself, okay? Now, from a business perspective, this is a little bit easier to think about, okay? Because again, Mark Cuban was applying all of this to business, specifically entrepreneurship and building empires. And I think it can very easily, right, be applied into that. And so looking at that, what are the results that I'm getting from my current marketing efforts? What does my revenue look like? What does my lead generation look like? What what is my conversion? I mean, these are pretty easy to look at, right? Engagement is exactly what it sounds like. Are people not just following my content, but engaging with it? Are they asking questions? Are they going back and forth? And then feedback. First of all, and the number one issue I see is that a lot of business owners are not actually asking their audience for feedback. But ask them, is this helpful? What else would you like to see? What would you have liked to have seen done different, right? Get feedback from the offers that you're putting on the table. Second step is critical, is to regulate before you decide. Now, again, I want y'all to remember there's this thing called the mind-body connection, okay? A healthy enough. I want to say healthy enough. We're shooting for 60%. We're not getting crazy, okay? Healthy enough functioning means that our mind and our body are able to communicate to one another. This is why sometimes you see people who get stuck in their head with analysis paralysis versus other times you see someone who's able to have a thought, evaluate it, and execute very quickly. But in between there, they're probably also able to discern. That person has a strong mind-body connection. That doesn't happen without a regulated nervous system. This is part of why I tell people it's not possible for me to just focus on your marriage. It is absolutely, in doing so, we are absolutely impacting your business. We are absolutely impacting your career. Because we are tenfold increasing your ability to execute. Not just make a decision, but actually act on it, okay? But here's the thing is that a lot of times, the high performers that I work with, they come into my office in a state of fight or flight. So remember, you have parasympathetic nervous system, or the branch of your nervous system called parasympathetic. This is rest and digest. Okay. This is where we have to get into in order to restore and heal our body. This has to happen. Okay. We also have this other branch called sympathetic. Now, when we live here, we live in fight or flight, meaning our body is on edge. We feel like we're going to war, and that is going to impact the way that we are consistently showing up. Here's the kicker is that a lot of my high performers come in fight or flight, and this actually benefits them in their business, right? Because it makes them push. They're working long hours and they are able to get things done no matter what, no matter the stress. They can cut through all of it. They can cut off connection to their body, and it's a great thing because they can command a presence in a room, right? But at the end of the day, they're coming to me for a reason. And usually that reason is that their personal life has been run into the ground. So you're also much more likely to move in a reactive state rather than in a regulated and discerning state. And this is the difference between moving as a worker bee, as someone who is climbing the ladder versus someone who is in a position of power, leadership, and necessary discernment. That takes regulation. This is why that transition into the C-suite is so challenging for people, because you bust your butt to get to this level, right? You bust your butt, and then all of a sudden, the thing that has been serving you is probably also going to run you into the ground. So we have to regulate that nervous system, notice the activation, discharge the activation, And then in order to come back into a state where you better understand the thought process, the data, and the way that you want to make meaning of it. Okay. So third step is to be very intentional with how you are actually making that meaning. This is what I hear, especially when I'm working with business owners who haven't quite hit that 500K mark yet, right? They will attribute failure to mean that they are a failure versus, and I think this is such a strength for me. I always tell people I've got real chaotic confidence, but I am excellent at moving forward in a messy way. And just knowing that if it doesn't work, I'm just going to pivot. It's fine. But let's just try it out and see what happens, right? Because if something doesn't work, it's not failure. It certainly doesn't mean anything about me other than I tried. And I'm going to take that data, I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to continue to move forward. Okay. But if you have a different meaning making process, if you make it about you, then it is going to be terrifying to take a step forward into this next level where you need to be. It's going to be so scary to go out on a limb and spend 10K on Facebook ads or Instagram ads, whatever it is, even though you could be possibly bringing in 100,000, right? You're never going to be able to take that step forward, get the data you need to pivot into potentially even higher of a return if you're afraid to take that step in the first place, right? So be very, very intentional that you are separating data from your identity. Last step, and I talk about this in my trust methodology, is choose an aligned adult action, right? Now, if you're able to listen to the data, regulate your nervous system, have a very healthy way of making meaning, typically step 4 is the easiest, right? We're going to take an aligned action. We are going to hold little me's hand and say, hey, we're going to give this a go. This is what we're going to do. I've got your back either way. But you're going to decide, thinking back to Mark's example, right? You're either going to double down, you're going to pause, or you're going to pivot. And in this process, if you can wash, rinse, and repeat these 4 steps over and over and over again, guys, you become limitless. This is the idea behind a limitless mindset. And again, it doesn't just work in business. It also works in your relationships. Maybe you decide to be vulnerable and open up with your husband and say, hey, the way that we have been splitting the load with the kids is not working for me. I am feeling like I am the go-to parent, and I feel like I am CEO at work and then I am CEO at home, and I don't like it. I really need help. I know that you do so much for this family, but what we are currently doing is not working for me. Those words are a lot easier to find if you are very aware that his response does not mean anything about you. If you are able to come into the conversation in a regulated state, and if you know that you are taking an aligned adult action, because at the end of the day, you're being honest with your partner, right? But here's the kicker. Here's why this is so hard for high-performing women, because they are conditioned early on to over-deliver in order to prove their worth, in order to receive attention or care. But there's a high cost that is on the line. Right? If the idea in my head is I have to overperform, I have to do all of these things in order to receive love, if there's an abandonment fear on the other side of this, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely not going to step out of line, because what if my partner doesn't want to be with me anymore? What if I lose my seat at this table that I've worked so hard to get to? Okay. These high-performing women have also been conditioned to see like fear of disappointing others or being seen as inconsistent as meaning that they are going to lose their sense of belonging at the table, right? So this starts way early on, guys. And I talk about this in earlier episodes, but essentially these women, their worth, their belonging in the family is tied to this idea the family can always count on them. And they always do what they're supposed to. They are such a good girl. And you're representing our family. So why wouldn't you want to go above and beyond, right? The other thing that really puts high-performing women at a disadvantage is the masculine-coded leadership bias that celebrates persistence but undervalues discernment. Women are meant to work in cycles. That is just the fact of our biology, right? Persistence and this pushing and this masculine, you have to be assertive all of the time. There's a difference between assertiveness and influence. There is a difference between persistence and discernment, right? One is grounded in a very feminine sense of abundance and power and command. And the other is this sense of hustle. Both have important places, but only one is going to truly speak to someone who is ready to embody a softness at home as well as at work, without losing their edge, right? If you can't really deeply connect to the sense of who you are, you're going to have a very hard time reconnecting that mind-body connection. This is why stepping out of a more masculine coded sense of leadership is so critical for women who are like, hey, cool, this worked. I made it to the C-suite. I am sitting and I am here putting out fires all the time, right? I have made it. And also I haven't had sex in 3 years. And also my adult child isn't speaking to me. And also I've got a middle schooler who really doesn't open up, and now they're dabbling into making decisions that they really shouldn't be making. And I don't know how to connect with them because they don't want to talk to me. And my hormones are all out of whack. And I've had a headache for the last 5 years, right? Like they run their personal lives. They have gotten career success at the expense of personal life success. This is a tremendously huge issue because without the personal end, what is this career actually worth? Right? This is what fuels that burnout loop in executive women over and over and over again. So again, when you are able to create a clean pivot, to know that you can always pivot, you are protecting your energy because you are taking out mindless and senseless worrying because I know how to read data. I know how to regulate. I know how to take an adult action. I know this has nothing to do with me, right? You are taking out so much additional worrying and data that just doesn't need to be there, okay? So you're protecting your energy, your team's energy. You're fostering a sense of trust. You're also freeing up those resources to bring them back into what actually works. Here's the thing with cognitive resources, guys. They're not infinite. We are not, what was that movie? I think there's literally a movie called Limitless, and it had like Scarlett Johansson, and she was like, I saw the movie forever ago. I forget exactly what happened. I don't know. There's like this one episode and she like walked into a room and she was like shooting the bad guys, but like with her mind, she wasn't actually doing anything. Okay. Like that's not what we're talking about here. Okay. What I am telling you is that you have a finite amount of cognitive resources available to you at any one time. You can choose to use them on worrying. You can choose to use them on making meaning about yourself in a way that's actually not true, but certainly is not like viable to your business, to your marriage, to your career. Or you can bring those resources in and you can use them to expand your vision. You can use them to go spend more time with your children. You can use them to sit down and have that hard conversation with your partner that you've been avoiding, right? Freeing up resources, one, is a real thing, and two, allows you to focus on where you actually need to be focusing on. And the last thing that this is going to give you is it's going to strengthen your identity as a decisive and aligned leader. And guys, so we have this thing called the confirmation bias in psychology. And it's this idea that once you have a belief, people are more inclined to find data that aligns with that. Okay. We also have this thing called the reticular activating system in your brain. And it's this part of your mind that actually allows you to control the way that you are perceiving and experiencing reality. Sounds crazy, but let me ask you this. Have you ever had the experience of saying, I really want a red four-wheeler? And then all of a sudden you started seeing them everywhere. The reason you started seeing them everywhere was not because Toyota went and sold more red 4Runners. It's because your mind was giving those data points more credence. It was paying attention to those. So this is a positive loop that we can leverage, right? Because here you would be strengthening your identity as a decisive and aligned leader. If you can trick yourself into believing this, maybe you don't completely buy it, but if you can tell yourself this is true, and then you can start finding data to continually bring this in, well, then it becomes true. Okay. So prompt I want to leave you with, right? If you have that journal out, is where in your leadership are you doubling down out of fear instead of pivoting from trust? Bonus points if you can apply this to work and home. Because guys, women, men, whatever it is, we are leading in our relationships. You are co-leading with someone, right? And a strong leader knows when to take a back seat or when to take a front seat. But the reality is that if you are a leader in your business and at home, you are also leading at home. In your business or in your career. Then you are also leading at home. We want to make sure that you're doing it effectively. That is all I have for y'all today. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you on the next one. Alrighty, friend, that is all for today's episode of the Aligned Powerhouse podcast. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And do me a favor, if this episode resonated, I want you to share it with another powerhouse woman in your life who is ready to lead and love from a place of self-trust. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review. It really does help more women find this work. New episodes drop every week. Until then, lead with self-trust and let yourself be seen.